Welcome. Today we have a special guest, Charlotte, from the Writing Center here at UNL. And for the last couple of years, I've asked somebody from the Writing Center to come in and help me give a talk on technical writing, but also how that pertains to coding itself and to the discipline itself. And so for the last couple of years, various people have come in and helped. Charlotte was part of the process last year, and now she's helping me this year. Please go ahead and take it away.
Yeah. All right. So my name is Charlotte Kupsch. I'm the assistant director of the UNL Writing Center, which is over in Andrews Hall. I think this morning I was like pointing where I thought that was and then walked out of the classroom and have no sense of direction in this building. But over at Andrews Hall is where we're normally located when we're not in the middle of a pandemic and working face to face. I'm also a PhD student in English, where I study composition and rhetoric, which more broadly is like the study of writing. Before I went to grad school, between when I got my bachelor's and my master's, I worked in the industry for a couple of years as a tech writer for a software company, Epic, that makes healthcare software. I think that's what UNMC is using as well. So that's sort of my background in tech. So I'm not as much like a code literate person, but I am very like technical writing literate and have a lot of that background. So that's part of the reason that I'm giving this talk today. So basically, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some elements of writing that we really emphasize in the Writing Center, and we're going to talk more about how those sort of translate into a code environment, as well as talking about the design document that you guys have the drafts of due tomorrow, and some thinking about how you can make that work better for you. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk a little bit about is why writing is important. And as like a PhD student and somebody who sort of has built a career in writing, I would tell you that writing is important just because you do it so much in your life, like as a human, whether it's at work or just casually. It's just part of the way we communicate, particularly right now when everything is online. But if that is not enough for you, it also really will be a big part of your future careers. So here we have some data from the National Association of Colleges and Employers. This is an association that collects data from employers. I think this study comes from 200 different employers, everybody from the Red Cross to like Apple. And basically it's what they care about, what sort of skills they care about in their new employees, and then the extent to which they feel like the new employees can do the things that they're being asked to do. So of the competencies up here, the ones that maybe relate more directly to writing and what we do in the center: teamwork and collaboration, obviously, critical thinking, problem solving, professionalism, and then oral and written communications, which of course is the one that's the biggest for writing. These percentages over here are the extent to which it's considered essential by those employers. Obviously, collaboration is always a big one. Critical thinking, sort of the nebulous thing that we're all expected to do. Professionalism, yes, and then oral and written communication. Just about 96% of employers in this group surveyed consider that essential, but unfortunately, they are not very impressed with their employees' abilities to do this, and they rate their proficiency at about 40%, particularly for oral and written communications. So even if my pitch, as like somebody who is building a career in writing, even if that pitch that writing is involved in our lives in big, important, fun ways, does not convince you, I think the fact that like it's a thing we need to do for our careers, right? And it's a thing that if you can write well and communicate well, gets you ahead in a career, because there are so many people who are not as proficient in these skills.
And two things that I would add on that is, one, that continually comes up in our student advisory board and our industry advisory board, IAP panel, whatever it's called, that it's really lacking in good written communication. It doesn't have to be like technical communication, technical writing that you're doing right now for this course. It could be just as simple as writing a memo or composing a professional email, right? A lot of candidates will just get nixed immediately because they put emojis or didn't use correct spelling in an email or something like that when they were conversing with an employer. The second thing that darn it, I should have written it down. All right, we'll come back to it. But again, it's really important, not just for national employers, but for local employers, and it comes up all the time.
Right, and I would also say that I think writing is one of those things that we can sort of get mixed messages about it, particularly in like the college setting, because in college you're doing probably quite a bit of writing, even if you're not in like a writing intensive field. You probably have to do like lab reports or response papers or this design document. Like you are writing quite a bit. Depending on your background, you may feel like this is not really something that you struggle with. Like you may think about, in like high school, you may have learned about writing multiple drafts and revising and having peer feedback and that kind of stuff. In college, you don't, depending on your field, you don't necessarily always need that kind of stuff in your writing. Personally, when I was in college, I just wrote like one draft of everything and it just worked out for me and I got grades that I liked and that was fine. And so I didn't really pay a lot of attention. I thought, oh, writing's done, I don't need to work on that skill. But I think it changes a lot when you get into the workplace and you're sort of out of the, I hesitate to say artificial, but somewhat artificial environment of college, right? Because the stakes are higher, you're writing different sorts of things. The stakes are higher because it's your job, but the stakes are higher because you're also writing for a different audience than just your teacher or your TA or whatever. And if you're not able to communicate effectively, the risk is bigger, what you'll lose is bigger. So some of those things that, like some of the things we're going to talk about today may seem like, okay, yes, I already know about like outlining or reverse outlining or whatever, but keep in mind that these are things that you might need to employ in different ways as your writing situations change around you. So it's always something to keep in mind, that regardless of what's happening now in your life with writing, things might develop later.
Sorry, now that I remember it, let me put it another way for you. So many years, not many years ago, but several years ago, the Department of Computer Science and Engineering established a minor in software development. This minor was targeted towards, say, somebody in the business college or somebody in the humanities or something like that. And the idea was that they know their discipline, they know marketing, or they know, accounting or something like that. But then on top of that, they've got these additional skills. They're not a computer science major. They're not going to be programming an entire system like you're doing right now in this class. But this minor was intended to give what was termed at the time value-added skills. That means that they would even go to employers and say, look, if you had, it was put by, employers put it as, if I was hiring a marketing person and I had just a regular marketing person and a marketing person who knew a little bit of code, they're getting hired. Now flip that around, because we're not, we are computer science majors here. What is our value-added skill? Right? If an employer is looking to hire a computer science graduate, a software engineer or a computer engineer, whatever, and you've got just a regular software engineer, computer science, whatever over here, and somebody over here, or good oral and written communication, that's the value added as far as our discipline goes. So this person is definitely going to get hired more. They're definitely going to go further in their career than somebody without those essential skills.
Yeah, and just going off that, I feel like that's even more important if you like say you know you want to stay in Lincoln or you want to go to a specific place and work, like if you're geographically sort of bound, the chances are higher that you may not end up working for a huge company. You might end up working for like a small company that's like a team of 10 people. So like if you're at a huge company, it may be that you can get by just being like really good at the one thing you do. But if you want to work for a smaller company, or you just want to because you don't like big companies, you like smaller sort of community culture better, it's more valuable for you to be able to do lots of different things, right? Okay, so today basically we're going to take you through a Freewrite to draw your attention to some of the parallels between coding and writing. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about reverse outlines, both for writing and for code. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the design document that you guys are hopefully working on or have looked at and begun to think about. That's your first draft of which is due tomorrow. All right. And these are also things that obviously we do in the Writing Center all the time. All right, so in the article, writing good code is like writing a novel. The author posits that the process of writing code and the process of writing a novel are quite similar. And in one section, the author focuses on like drafts and writing process. So what I want you guys to do is think about how you might draft an essay or any piece of writing. In the Writing Center, the way we will often start with folks is have them just do free writing. which basically is just sort of word vomiting on the page, writing down whatever comes to mind, that kind of thing, just to get you started. So what I want you to do is free write for a while about your own writing process. So from the day you get the assignment or read it on Canvas or whatever, right up until you turn in that final draft, what has your writing process been like? You could think in this class, you could think in other classes. If you need to kick it back to like high school, you can do that. Just think about like what is generally your approach. So free write about that approach. And then part 2 of that, as you sort of write about that writing process, those steps you take, think about how are those similar to your coding processes. And people who are watching online, I'm also going to have you all do this along with us. So we'll give you 3 or 4 minutes to free write, and then we'll talk about some of the things that you've come up with.
One good question would be draft A to draft B. Right? When you go to draft A, you can't immediately start drafting B, right?
Mm-hmm.
Walk away, right? And then come back to it with a fresh face.
Mm-hmm.
How much time is necessary?
Right. Yeah.
Do we know?
I think it depends entirely like on the context, you
Okay.
know, of what you're writing and what you're doing. I think in my own classes, I try to at least give like a week between the two,
Okay.
which I honestly also feel like is not truly enough time given how much other stuff, you know, students are working on. But I try to give it a week, and then I try to do like, I give them feedback, they get feedback from their peers, and then they at least like, if they can't generate changes themselves, they have like stuff from other sources. So.
Okay.
And I think I also usually talk to my students about like ways to create distance between yourself and the draft, whether it's like putting in a different font, printing it out, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Sometimes like seeing it in a different way will help people kind of rethink it, you know. right, so wrap up your last thought there, okay, if it's not a beautiful piece of prose yet. So I'm gonna have you guys share a little bit about some ideas about like the process you normally take going from, you know, idea to final draft. If you're watching online, if you wanna put some thoughts in the chat too, we'll be sure to look at those. So yeah, let's tackle this first bullet first. What are the steps you take to get from idea to final draft? And then we'll move on to the coding process after we get a couple answers. So I said earlier today, I haven't been teaching in person since October, so I'm not as used to like staring people down and waiting for their responses. So if you want to just volunteer, then I won't have to remind myself how to force people to respond. How does that usually go for you?
Well, for me, at least when I've been writing like papers the past semester, I like used to say, okay, it's the list of requirements, what do they want from me? And just sort of like break it down into like most simplistic steps, or basically like most broad but still simpler. Like first I answer question 1 and question 2, and I just sort of like get started and just like vomit all my ideas out onto the actual Word document that will eventually become my final draft. I'm just like, that's way too wordy. Like, take stuff out, and I like wait a day or whatever, and show it to someone else, see if they catch anything. And yeah.
I like that, you vomit everything all out at once, you free-write.
Right. Yeah, so that was figuring out big points first, like what absolutely needs to go in here, getting sort of a structure, and then sort of word vomiting, editing as you go, talking to somebody else, giving it some time, coming back and doing final touches. Yeah, that's really standard. I feel like a lot of people sort of follow similar processes. Anybody else? What are some of the kind of steps you take?
Yeah, so I think like I pick up a topic first and then I categorize it in my mind. So what are the subtopics that I'm going to talk about? And then I jump on writing the subtopics and fill them up as I think suits the topic. And then later, like when I'm done with the paragraphs in between, I do the introduction and the conclusion, and then I read it all at once to see if I'm going off topic somewhere, and then I get it reviewed, and then read it again twice or thrice before I submit it.
Yeah, so thinking about like your big topics, subtopics, filling those in, and I like how you said you write the intro and the conclusion maybe last. This happens a lot. People we tend to think about and we're taught that maybe writing is like a smooth process where first you're planning and then you're drafting and then you're revising, when in actuality a lot of us are like figuring things out as we're writing, which is why a lot of times people will say like, I can't write my thesis statement until I've written the whole draft because I don't know what I'm talking about until I've done it, right? And you can, personally there are times I have planned a whole paper and then written it exactly as I planned it. But you also lose something in that too, because when you're writing about something, you're going to explore it in different ways, right? You're going to go down different avenues, and I like that your way sort of acknowledges like there'll be like some twists. I'll go off topic a little bit, and I'll need to come back and pull it back, right? And that's also, by the way, a totally normal part of writing, and it's not something we tend to think of like good writers and maybe bad writers struggle, and good writers just walk around with a glow of white light, and everything is easy and perfect for them. But no matter how proficient you get or how advanced you are at writing, pretty much everybody struggles. The funny thing is pretty much everybody struggles almost exactly the same amount with like getting the stuff in their head into like some format on the page and then dealing with it. Like it's funny how the further in my PhD I get, the more I'm like, oh, I'm still having the same struggles that I did when I was a freshman in college or a freshman in high school or stuff like that. So yes. There's a lot of complexity and a lot of circles. We go in a lot of circles when we write. Thoughts about how these steps or any parts of your own process might be similar to your coding process?
Like the main idea of breaking things down and figuring out like the key problems that you have to solve is like basically the same when you create a big project. Small pieces.
Yeah, so breaking it down into small pieces, that's the same in coding and in writing. Yeah, absolutely. Other things that are similar.
In the revision process, kind of making it more efficient with the program, so starting to like remove things or rethink something like that.
Yeah, so when you're revising, you're trying to make it more efficient, and that's happening in both. Yeah, so yeah, to the point about sort of going off track when you're writing that first draft, when you go back, you really are trying to make your writing get to whatever point you have decided on in a clearer way, in a more concise way. Yeah, absolutely.
Online, we have a good comment that having a plan of where you're going next is important, so that you're not just in the in the ether, wandering in the forest or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Yeah, let's keep going.
Keep going? All right.
Yeah.
Oops. All right.
Okay, so one thing, and I like this idea of wandering in the ether. One thing that you might do when you're in the wilderness with your draft is once you have the draft written, you might take a look at it, and if it's a rough draft, there's going to be a lot of like thinking that you did on the page. It's going to kind of have taken a different direction maybe than you expected. And you might look at a draft and be like, oh crap, there's like a lot of stuff in here that I need to pull together or figure out how to tighten it up a little bit, reorganize it, that kind of stuff. One thing that I do a lot in the Writing Center, and I try to make my students do when I'm teaching, and they don't like it, but I know it helps, is reverse outlining. And people don't like this because we don't like to go back to the thing that we already wrote. We want it to be perfect on the first try. And if we can get away with it, we will submit the thing without revising it. I understand. I also do this. I have also sent that text without revising. So reverse outlining allows you a way to look at what you have and figure out a clearer way, a more concise way to do it. So what you do is you start with a complete draft. You summarize the function of each paragraph in one sentence. And then you want to number the paragraphs as well. So by function, I really mean like separate from content, right? So a paragraph might be talking about something, but its function might be very different. So you might be giving an example, and the example is like a scene from your childhood or something. That's the content. But the function maybe is like to elicit an emotional response in my reader and make them want to do the thing that I want them to do or something like that. So that's the function. And then what this allows you to do is see the moves you're making as a writer or the moves you're making as a coder in each sort of paragraph, each section, each chunk, so that you can figure out, are there duplicate functions anywhere in here? Are two paragraphs doing the same thing? If so, could I combine those? Should I put them next to each other if they're both the same? And are there any functions I'm leaving out? Is there something I really needed to do that I assumed I did but didn't quite get there? And I think this is one of the things that makes writing kind of difficult, is that there's content and then there's function, and sometimes we're saying one thing and we're hoping that it will achieve another thing. And it's not always clear to us why we're doing something. Particularly in academic writing, I think we learn how to do it in a certain format or a certain way, and then that's where you get people saying like, well, the last sentence of your introduction has to be your thesis statement. That's the way it has to be, because some of us are taught that in school, like in K-12, when really as a writing teacher, like, I do not care what your thesis statement, it doesn't matter, but we get so caught up in sort of the function or sort of the structure of it that we get confused with where the content is. And that's a lot of times where people will get off track with their drafts, is when they have content and they're not sure what the function of it is, or they're not paying enough attention to the function of the stuff in there. Yeah, let's go on this one. So here's an example of a couple of paragraphs that one of my former colleagues wrote when she was applying for a job. I think job materials and like cover letters, stuff like that, scholarship applications, are often the easiest place to see this difference between content and function, because we all kind of know what the function of like a cover letter for a job is, so it's a little bit easier to see. So she writes in blue here, I'm writing with great enthusiasm to apply for the position of Learning Commons Supervisor. I'm currently the Associate Director of the Writing Center at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Second paragraph in green here, I have 7+ years of experience providing tutoring and admin support. As the Associate Director of the Writing Center, I'm responsible for supervising a staff of 20 undergrad, grad tutors who meet individually with students, staff, faculty to conference about the writing My responsibilities include blah, blah, blah. Let's go to the next slide. Oh. Okay, so in this first one, in blue, I'm writing with great enthusiasm. She is introducing herself and her purpose to the reader. And then in the second one, she's explaining why she's qualified for the job. So this would be sort of the reverse outline of what she's doing here. And the reason why I say that this is so important to do, or it's easier to see in job materials, is because we kind of all know that in a cover letter you need to introduce yourself, talk about why you're great for this position, talk about some experiences, have some kind of closing. So we know those elements are there, but sometimes we get, people tell us all sorts of chaotic things about how we're supposed to put a job application together or something. You know, some people will say, start with a hook, say that you've wanted to do this job since kindergarten or something. And again, sometimes we get caught up in what we think it should look like, and we forget about just what is the function that I need to do. Like, we get so caught up in the content of I need to provide this great example or whatever, that we lose track of, is it doing the thing that I want it to do? What function is it fulfilling? How can I tweak it so that it still fits with the function?
And just a plug, remember next week is Career Fair Week, right? So it's going virtual, online. It's also e-week next week. So there are lots of opportunities and workshops for drafting a cover letter, a generic cover letter that you can then send to 10 different employees or employers. And of course also your CV or your resume. Even if you're not planning on getting an internship this first year, first of all, you're plenty qualified after your first year in computer science to have a paid internship, even as a freshman. Many freshmen have one right now. Anybody have an internship right now? Right? So don't think that you're not qualified at all. Internships are there for you to be an intern. They're not expecting you to be a graduate yet. But even if you're not looking, even going to those is good practice because it's really low pressure, right? If you're not looking to get a job, or if I get an offer, great. If I don't, fine. You're at ease. You get good practice in both your oral and written communication because you're giving out your CV and you're talking about yourself. And you'll find that once you give out your CV, then it's on file. They may be calling you in a couple of years, even if you're not looking right now. All right.
Okay, so what we're going to do is another short activity where we're going to have you all reverse outline some code and sort of apply those same principles. So numbering the paragraphs or numbering the chunks of code that you have, and then focusing on the function of them.
So remember this exercise, I think we did this in PHP. I don't know if we completed it or not, but it's something that I've done in the main section. And it's really easy to understand what the purpose or what the goal of this exercise is. There's a suffix array. So given a word, like say science, all the suffixes are science, a word is its own suffix. And then cayens, without the first letter, without the first two letters, without the first three letters, etc., all the way down until you get to the last suffix, right? Suffixes, not prefixes. Then once you've got all the suffixes, you sort them, and that's your suffix array. You sort them in lexicographic order. So we didn't go over the Java version in this section, but here is a Java version that solves that problem. It doesn't have the boilerplate Java stuff here. But these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines of code solve that problem, okay, and result in that output. So go ahead and reverse outline them.
Yep.
Just take a few minutes here. We'll let you go ahead, and you don't have to copy the code down or anything like that. Just outline it, basically. Reverse outline it.
And we'll give you a few minutes to do that, and then we'll ask you to give us some examples of how you did that. thinking about whether Epic did design documents. I'm not sure that I ever saw anything like that. We wrote like other stuff, like we did user guides
User
and
guides,
then like guides for the analysts who would like put it, you know, like build the Legos that make the whole thing. But I don't know if there was a lot of, I don't know what their documentation process was.
To this day, I still remember the interview process. It was long and rigorous.
It was intense, yeah. And then you start there and it's a 6-month like training period basically, and yeah.
They're super nice. I forgot my stuff there. Like I had like a portfolio and stuff
Yeah.
like that, and I just and I got in a plane and called them back and said, I left all my stuff there. Don't worry, we'll mail it to you. Thanks.
Yeah, they're really part of the reason they're recruiting and part of the reason their campus is so like weird is because they're trying to attract people who would otherwise be, you know, out in Silicon Valley or in
Right.
Seattle or, you know.
Madison's far.
It's a cool city. I mean, it's cold, but
Hop right on down to Chicago,
That's-
go over to
that's what I'm
Milwaukee.
saying. Yeah, Minneapolis, not that far away. But I grew up there, so you know, I'm biased. Okay, so let's take like 10, 20 more seconds just to finish up. No worries if it's not perfect. And then, all right, does anybody want to summarize sort of like what headings or what functions they felt each chunk or one of the chunks is doing?
What about that first chunk?
It initializes the list and then it fills the list
With
with strings.
with suffixes,
Yeah,
string
yeah.
suffixes. Yep, exactly. And how did you know that was the first chunk that she was referring to?
Good question.
Well, visually, what do you see?
It's separated.
It's separated with white space, right? Good style. Right? And then the second chunk, you know that that's the second chunk because, again, it's offset by white space, right? What does that do? It sorts it, right? It does what it says in the box. Now, what about that third chunk? It just prints it out, right? And so that's essentially the that's essentially the outline that we would have written if we had outlined it first and then went to the code, right? That we would have started with that outline, and that's the code that probably would have resulted. But here's another example.
Yep.
Now this is the exact same problem. This code works. This code does exactly the same functionally as the previous slide. So anybody want to take a shot at that, at outlining that or reverse outlining that? No? Why? Does that look like a product of an outline to begin with? No. What does that look like? It's a product of throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks, right? I mean, what do you see on that very first, not first line, but the second two lines there? Commented out non-functional code. At some point, they were trying to, debug it using poor man's debugging of just putting stuff out. And then they got rid of it by simply just commenting it out because they weren't done with it, right? Now, going back to the idea of drafting, if you are going to strike a sentence from a paper that you're writing, do you just write a line through it and then hand it in with the sentence still there with a line through it? No, right? You take that out of your final draft. You kind of see that they're chunks, but for some reason there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 chunks, and when there was only 3 chunks in the original. So already you're seeing like, well, there's a lot of superfluous code here. So again, going back to drafting, if you have 3 paragraphs that basically say the same same thing, right, and you're just reiterating the same ideas over and over again, what should you do with those 3 paragraphs? Cut it down, right, to 1 paragraph with the one main idea. There is extra superfluous work here. For example, in the third chunk, they're just creating another array after they've already created their array in the second chunk, because they don't know exactly what they're doing. And just so you know that this was built from actual examples that were turned in a couple of years ago. I just took some of the worst submissions, the worst aspects of each of them, and then put them all together. So this is not the product of just one deranged coding mind. Several deranged coding minds. Exactly. Right?
Because if just one of us awful people get together, imagine the things we can create together.
Exactly.
Let's,
Designed by committee.
can we go back to
Oh,
the-
sorry, sure.
Yeah, and I think like thinking about writing, I mean, this stuff just like happens sometimes, like we were talking about, sometimes you write and you don't know where it's going yet, and you end up with a huge mess that you're not sure how to get out of, but you can get it from this right back to the one that we were looking at before, right? And that's where sort of these ideas of thinking about like drafting and revising and maybe using reverse outlines to figure out where something has gone off the rails is a good idea. So it's perfectly fine if your first draft of something looks a little messy and is a little unwieldy. I was saying this morning, as a PhD student, I'm in like a phase where I have to read like 80 books, and then I eventually will say something about those books, I guess, but I'm still working on it. And I'm trying to like write every week, try to write like little summaries and analysis, and I haven't been doing it because I don't want to, I just want to read. And so when I went to work on it on Tuesday in a writing center appointment, actually, a lot of it was just like sort of unraveling these strands and figuring out how they fit together. And my notes kind of look sort of like this right now because I don't know how they will fit together. But using sort of the tools, the sort of revising and drafting and stuff is going to help figure out what, like right now I'm still in the, I'm not sure what I'm trying to say part of it, right? But as I'm going, I'm also leaving myself notes about why I'm thinking the things I'm thinking, why I'm doing the stuff I'm doing, because there's nothing worse, and this happened to me 2 days ago, than finding a note to yourself that doesn't make sense and that you haven't laid a good path for yourself. So I think we were talking this morning about like, the design document, right? So if you are trying things and they're not working, you want to leave a note for yourself, but also for other people who might want to use your design later on, right? So if you try some method and it's not working, this code doesn't work or something, you want to make sure, or like most people would start here, but that didn't work for us and here's why. You want to document that.
Right.
And I think obviously for other people, you want to document it so they know why you did what you did, but also for yourself as you're going, because again, this is like the thing where if you're working with a simple project, like a 1-page response paper, you know why you did what you did. You're going to do it in like 30 minutes and then turn it in and it's going to be fine. But as you start to work with bigger and bigger projects that are more complex, you will not remember why you did the thing you did 2 weeks ago. You will not remember what you had for breakfast this morning. You know how it is. So you leave yourself notes and leave yourself a route so that even if you do start with this, you can follow your line of thinking and you don't end up having to do the same work multiple times just to figure out where you were before.
And that's even more important in a design document that is intended for another person, to communicate that to another person. And that's why in the IEEE format, but also in the templates that we've given you, there is a spot for alternative designs, right? What are the things that you tried that didn't work? Put that there, right? You might get lucky and you might just design it perfectly the first time, and that section will be blank. Good on you. But if you ever you find yourself refactoring your code, going back and changing your design, then you should put that that's an excellent opportunity to put that into the design document and make it more substantial.
All right, so design documents. Hopefully some of these questions that I'm about to pose are like, you've already figured it out for this assignment, considering that you're working on it for like tomorrow. But I'm gonna go over them anyway because they're sort of universally applicable questions anytime you're writing or doing composing of any kind, right? So anytime you're faced with like a new writing situation, a new composing task, the first thing you want to focus on is this first question: what are you writing? This sounds like really simplistic and obvious because like if you're doing an assignment for school, obviously you're doing the assignment for school. But I think the thing that we tend to forget is also like, what is the goal or why has this been assigned, right? So particularly I think like in school and then in the workforce to some extent, we often get caught up in like, I was given the assignment so I will do it, right? And not thinking about, and like to some extent that's fine, right? That's a good survival strategy. But also, what is the goal? That's going to help you figure out what you need to include, what kind of information, what makes sense, what level, that sort of stuff. So what's the goal? What is it supposed to achieve? Second question, who's it for? Is your audience somebody who knows roughly the same stuff that you do? Is it somebody who knows less? Is it somebody who knows more? And of course that works in tandem with that first goal, audience and purpose, right? Thinking about what kind of language do I need to use? What sort of stylistic choices am I going to make? What approach will I take to this? And then of course, why is it important? Deeply related to the other two, right? But like, is this a low stakes thing? What's going to happen as a result of this document? And I think all three of these questions are really at the heart, I believe they're at the heart of like, anytime we're trying to communicate or compose anything at all, having a good understanding of these three things, the audience, the purpose, and what's at stake, is going to help you navigate sort of the pitfalls of composing things and getting them out of your head and onto the page and into somebody else's head. And we don't often think of them, especially because we are so often just given tasks to do. And of course our default is like, okay, I will do the thing that you told me to do, right? And I think a lot of times when writers get in the weeds or get very stuck, especially in school, is because they don't understand like one of those 2 points, like either the goal, like what they're supposed to learn or achieve, or what they're trying to demonstrate, or the audience. And the audience is especially tricky because when you're in school, your audience is always your professor. Like it's the person who is giving you the grade. It's the TA or the instructor or the professor. So that seems pretty easy, except it's also like not that person a lot of times in school. You're supposed to be writing for a different sort of audience, or you're supposed to imagine yourself in like somebody else's chair. You're supposed to imagine yourself in the workforce. Sometimes you're imagining yourself in situations where you're like, well, I have never been in that situation, and I don't really know what business people want from this business document, right? So sometimes you're sort of projecting and trying to understand a situation you haven't quite been in yet. But I think just acknowledging that you may be in a situation where you're sort of doing this double talk of like, I'm writing to my audience and also to my professor, helps you be more aware of like, as you're going through thinking about what is the function of this paragraph. Sometimes there's a function where you're saying, hello, I did the reading, right? Or like, here's my required 4 sources. I have cited them here for you. Although maybe don't put them all in one place. That's very obvious. Comes across very lazy as a writing instructor. Anyway, and I think in the workforce too, asking about audience and purpose, you're never going to go wrong. You're never going to come off unprofessional. Asking somebody, what is our goal with this document, and can you tell me more specifically about who this is intended for? Particularly in tech writing, we talk about the users, right? What do the users want with this document? What will the users do with this document? Where in the process are they going to encounter it? Are they going to be like reading it? Are they going to be skimming it? Particularly as we talk about design documents, I always think about when I was a tech writer, I wrote on the whiteboard in my office that analysts, who were my users, my readers, who were setting up the software, don't like to read, right? People don't like to, if you're reading a technical document, your goal is to be done with that technical document. That's why we don't read, the manual for our microwave or whatever. So keeping those things in mind will help you a lot. So hopefully you know this already, but let's talk about the purpose and the audience, and well, we know why it's important, but the purpose and the audience for the design document that you're writing. What is the goal of that?
Go ahead.
To explain what our project is about and how we got to the end goal, how we went about achieving our goal and the steps we took.
Yeah, and to the side, yeah. go for it.
So that like, if a bus hits me and I'm dead, so the other programmer can continue my legacy.
Good.
This is the
Legacy.
best response. I love that. Cool. Yes, to continue your legacy. Great. Okay. Yeah. So that is what you're doing in the design document. Where would for this class? Where would you go if you didn't know the answers?
Me? Where am I going to send you if you ask me?
Stack Overflow.
Yeah, back to the whatever the instructions
All right. And where are the instructions?
in
Canvas.
Canvas. Yeah.
Yep.
Good job.
Yep. So overview and requirements. Most professors hopefully will set up a Canvas site intuitively so that requirements are there. Do we want to hit this? Yeah. So basically what you guys are saying, the design document should be clear and comprehensive enough that a reasonably technically competent person, so you're writing for somebody who has sort of the same skill set as you, right, could reproduce your system design, maybe not every detail, with identical functionality, without access to your actual code base because you've been hit by a bus. And then you'll be evaluated based on how well your design document can do the thing, and then also your technical writing skills by evaluating the stuff that you can find there.
Right. Write it in character. You're not writing it to me. You're not writing it to somebody who already knows object-oriented programming. They know Java. You're not going to be talking about Java, right? You're going to be talking about your design, right? It's going to be more abstract than that kind of low-level stuff. Because the purpose is, if you've got a good design document, it doesn't matter that it was written in Java using an SQL or a MariaDB database. Somebody could take your design document and reproduce the implementation in C# using Postgres, right? Completely different technologies, but same exact functionality. Right? So don't write it so that, definitely don't write it, say, in the first person, like I did this or we did this or something like that. Keep it impersonal, keep it technical, keep it abstract. Good.
Yeah. So knowing your audience and your purpose as you go through here is going to dictate, it's going to help you out with a lot of decisions. If you say, should I put this in the design document? All you have to ask yourself is, will it help the people this is for do the thing that this is supposed to do? So other places that you could find more about the design document, if you've never written one before, is probably down here in the examples. I feel like there was, you talked about
the 3 student examples are something that I've done in the past that I decided not to do this year, simply because traditionally what I did is I took the previous years or the previous semester's best 3 examples and provided them to the next semester's students. Unfortunately, it turned into one of 2 things, either passive plagiarism or active plagiarism. The active plagiarism manifested itself by people just grabbing the text from one of the examples, cutting and pasting, and changing words here and there. Then accidentally forgetting to change all the words, and so your project that is dealing with a video game sales system has a bunch of references to stocks and bonds and stuff like that because the previous year was a financial application system, right? And that was the active plagiarism. The passive plagiarism was where they basically just copy-pasted and changed enough so that they weren't, they didn't copy-paste, but basically they copied the same structure, right? And it had very, very little to do with their actual design because they were writing about this other person's design, not writing about their own design because they were going off of those examples. But that professional example, it's about 30 pages, is from an actual company, and we've got a sample here in a second here. But we're not expecting 30 pages. Do not give us 30 pages. We don't want to see 30 pages. That is a real system, and so it is way more complex than what you're doing this semester. I don't want to shoot for a page number that you should have a minimum number of pages or a maximum number of pages or anything like that, because it's going to vary depending on your design. And also, we're talking about technical writing. Technical writing should not be long, right? I'm reading a novel right now. It's 400 pages. No, it's all text, because it's a novel. This is not a novel. This is an excerpt from that professional example, and
Yeah, and it's sort of just on that idea about using examples to guide your writing. I mean, I think the reason that writers so often do that is because, again, there's something they're not understanding about why they're doing what they're doing. And so, and of course, like, you just grab whatever you can and you're like, okay, I'll do 4 bullets because they did 4 bullets, right? So this is where reverse outlining and thinking about function can really help, because then instead of sort of, you know, not being able to see what you're doing and just sort of following blindly, you are thinking more about why the writer of the sample did what they did and how you can apply those principles to what you're doing as well. So what we're going to have you do here is try to reverse outline this design overview that's here. Maybe we can like full screen the PowerPoint to make it a little bigger, if that'll work with the online stuff. So remember, just focus on looking at the function of each chunk of text or paragraph of text. What's the function? And then giving those some numbers as well so you can see what is happening. So we'll give you just a couple minutes to do that. You don't need to get all the way through if you can't get all the way through, but just take some of that and then we'll chat about how that process goes. Let's have you take maybe 30 more seconds and just wrap up the last little chunk of text that you're working on. No worries if you don't get all the way through. All right, so how did the process of reverse outlining this go? Was it, would you say it was like easier or harder?
Probably easier.
Easier? Okay.
what made it easy? Yeah, sorry. Good.
What sorts of things made it easier to?
Well, the headings kind of give you a direction on what's going on.
Right. Yeah, it's sort of like it does what it says on the tin, right? So up at the top, approach. This document is designed and extended in multiple phases, so we're going to talk about the phases. Here's our approach, here's the different steps we took. Goals and constraints. Okay, so it's probably going to be about some goals and constraints. Right, so this is what good technical writing does. It sort of, it gives you the outline as you read the thing, so that as a reader, when you're going through, you learn what to expect from the document as you read it, right? If we want to hit the next slide to zoom in a little bit. So this is just that first section, a little bit larger for you. We can also see that in things like the parallel language, right? So during the requirements phase, this will happen. During the system design phase, this will happen. During the construction phase, this will happen. During the transition and training phase, this will not happen. So that it teaches you how to read it. You know what to expect. This is not the place to worry about like repeating yourself or worry about like keeping the reader super engaged and hanging off of every word, right? This is the place where you remember like your reader probably does not like to read everything that you're saying here. You want to make it easy for them so that they can find the stuff that they need. The chunks sort of, you could see it more I think in the longer one, but the chunks of text are really only a couple sentences long. It's very clear, it's concise, it's to the point. And it's only giving you kind of the major things that you need to know. This is not something that is like super easy to do, because often when you start doing something like this, you don't know what the most important thing is. So you will do that thing where you take some detours before you figure out exactly what it is that you need to say. Writing concisely and clearly is also a skill that you can get better at over time. It doesn't come naturally to everybody right away, particularly because we are complex people and we do not think concise, simple thoughts, right? So it takes time. Give yourself some patience. That's also why you're doing this in drafts, right? So somebody can either tell you, I didn't understand what you were saying here, or I really understood after like sentence 1. You don't need to give me 8 more sentences about it. So that's why we're doing the drafts here. The other thing that I usually say about like concision and clarity is if you're really stuck with how to express something complex, think about how you would say it just like conversationally, right? The language will not always be perfect because we tend to speak more casually than we want to write, but often the structure will be right. Like the structure will present itself to you just in the way we talk because we're used to communicating to be understood.
And that's where a partner can really come in handy, because you can act as each other's editors and you can bounce ideas off of each other. You can, like you said, you can read, figure out how to say it by simply talking to them, and that's what you end up writing down. Another item that I would say is, again, if you find yourself writing large amounts of text, it can be hard to cut them down. Why? You put a lot of work into that big giant text, right? It's worth something. Well, no, it's that's the fallacy of sunken cost, right? Where I put a lot of time and effort into that paragraph, and I don't want to throw it away because it filled the whole page. Be comfortable with slashing it and cutting it down to only 1 paragraph. Again, no page requirements or anything like that. If you have a stupid page requirement, then sure, go ahead and pad that out to reach the pages or whatever. But this is a technical document. It should be terse. It should be concise as much as possible. Same thing with code. Remember, one of the quotes by Eric S. Raymond that I'm always quoting is, be comfortable with throwing one away. A draft, right? Be comfortable with throwing that draft away and starting completely new. Or be comfortable with at least taking a hatchet to what you've made already. It's prototyping. Your drafts are prototypes.
I am a big fan to that point of throwing things away. I'm a big fan of the approach to revision where I like, if in writing, I'll start over with just like a brand new Word document, which is kind of scary because you do have to like do all the work over again. But once you've done the thinking in your head, sometimes you'll often be able to remember what you wrote or what needs to come next. And sometimes the way you remember it will be more efficient. Like you will just remember the highlights, and then you'll be able to write them in a way that is a little bit clearer than before.
Another aspect is diagrams. So if you find yourself again writing big giant chunks of text, a picture is worth 1,000 words. A well-drawn diagram is worth 1,000,000. Right? This is an entity relation diagram. It's something that you will do later on when you design your database. It's basically each one of these is a table. The relationships are illustrated with the arrows here. So there's some relationship between them. It gives you the big picture, but at the same time you can focus down on one area of that picture and look at the details. So basically it has everything in one place, easily visually, that you can look at whatever you want to. If you had an equivalent text describing this database right here, you would have 10 pages. All right? How are you going to find anything by reading text after text after text? You're gonna you can't, right? To find what you're looking for, you're gonna have to reread from the beginning every single time. So that's why we don't require it, but you're gonna want to do it. Don't write 10 pages of database design stuff. Just generate an ER diagram. It's really easy. It's only 2 clicks. All right?
Okay, so I don't think you said the thing about the rubber duck, did you?
Oh well. Remember that if you didn't team up, all right, what do we always tell you? You still verbalize it. You still tell somebody, "Here's my problem," and you walk through it. You verbalize it. If you force yourself to verbalize it to somebody else, then that forces you to think through your thoughts and straighten everything out. If you don't have somebody in front of you, you don't want to partner up. What do? Rubber duck debugging, right? And just to prove to everybody that it actually is there, there is my rubber duck. Everybody, and now you can go watch that video, or you can come over here and see my rubber duck. But I've got rubber ducks in all of my monitors. Why? Rubber duck debugging. You can talk to your rubber duck. You might seem crazy, but there's nobody there, right? If there was somebody there, talk to them.
I really like this idea of the rubber duck, and I cannot believe that that computer science does it, and we don't do it. But we should. So I wanted you to say that because it's a good transition into the Writing Center, which is a different version of a rubber duck. If you need to talk to somebody, who will talk back to you?
In a good way.
Yes. If you need that kind of bouncing it off of somebody, that's what the Writing Center is. I think a lot of times in college, or just in writing situations, we know that we need somebody else's opinion, and often what I did in college especially was I would ask my roommate or try to trick a friend into helping me with something, or I would call my mom. And it's great to talk to your mom or your guardians, your loved ones, but talk about something more fun than whatever you're working on for your philosophy class or whatever. Save that for people who are paid to talk to you about your ideas. Your mom is probably busy and would rather hear other things from you. So the Writing Center does that sort of having a conversation with you about your writing, giving you a reader, giving you somebody else to bounce ideas off of. So we offer one-on-one tutoring. We call them consultations with undergrad and grad writing consultants. Writing in any discipline, any stage of the writing process, whether you are you just got a prompt and you're really worried about that assignment, or you're midway through a big project and just want to work with somebody, or if you're just polishing it off. We work with academic or non-academic writing. It can be for a class, it can be a job application, it can be scholarship application. I've been working with a lot of that stuff recently. So any stage, anywhere in the university, any part of the process, any type of writing. The other thing that people often tend to think about the Writing Center is that it's remedial, it's a place where bad writers go to work on their bad problems, which is not true at all. Really, we work with people, and it goes back to that idea of struggling with writing is not just something you do when you are a bad, lowly writer, and then eventually you get to some golden spot where you don't need help with your writing anymore. So I always share that I use the Writing Center a lot. I mentioned I used it on Tuesday. I set up a recurring weekly appointment in the Writing Center to work on some stuff that I'm working on for my PhD work. In my case, I really set up an appointment because I didn't want to do the thing, and I just wanted to have 40 minutes where somebody else was there. So I had to do the thing, and I couldn't not do it. That would have been rude, and I'm from the Midwest, so my social, I had to do it. And basically I talked to the consultant about what I had been reading and sort of what my takeaways were. She took notes the whole time, so she just wrote down what I was saying. and then gave that to me at the end, and I had like this nice transcript of things that I had said that then when I had to go eat the frog later and do it, it was a lot easier to do because I had those notes. So it can be a good space to like talk through problems that you're having with somebody. It can also just be a good space to like plan it out and give it a time to be worked on in a little bit more formal setting. Let's go to the next slide. So as I mentioned, we're normally over in Andrews Hall. We are all online right now. We have been for almost a year. I don't know what it'll look like next semester. I assume as things on campus sort of go back to face-to-face as the dominant mode, we will also be going back face-to-face, but I'm not sure yet. So for spring semester, at least, we are all online. You can make appointments, so all the information is at unl.edu/writing. You can make an appointment. There are two types. You can come in for an online appointment, which is like face-to-face, sort of like a Zoom call. We use a different platform, but you chat with somebody about your work. You can do email feedback as well. That's you send in a draft, and someone will look at your work, leave some comments for you, and then send it back to you. In this process, it really is more like a conversation. So in the same way that the Writing Center is not like a place for dummies to go to fix all of their issues, it's also not like a dry cleaning service where you drop off your work and we present it to you clean and fixed and without any issues, right? It really is a conversation. So there are lots of reasons, like besides the fact that like we're in school and people will not do your work for you. But the other reason is you're the expert on your own writing and what you're trying to say. Your design documents are all going to look different, even if you're sort of approaching things in similar ways in your code. Your design documents are going to look different because you're different writers. You have different ways of expressing it, and like that's one of the cool and also very complex and awful things about writing is that there's not one answer for how to do it. There's lots of different ways. So we try to really honor that and keep the agency with you so that you can still figure out what you're trying to say. We're also trying to help you get skills and develop skills that you can take with you so that you're not just working within one. So we try to say like, we don't just make better writing, we make better writers. So we're trying to foster those skills and help you with that. So when we're doing video chatting, the consultant will ask you lots of questions. They may have you read your work out loud just so you can both get a sense of how it's sounding, how it's looking. And they'll ask a lot of questions about what's going on. You'll both sort of work together to identify places where something's not working, where you want to change something, as well as places where you're knocking it out of the park and doing a great job. And it's the same model with that e-tutoring email feedback, even though it is asynchronous. They won't go in and like change your words for you. They'll leave a bunch of comments that will ask similar questions and say, hey, this is really good. Maybe you could try this thing, doing the same thing that you've done here later. Or, hey, I don't understand the function of this paragraph, or stuff like that. So it really is sort of a conversation. When you come in virtually, you'll definitely want to have in your mind, right? It's going to be a conversation where you're both participating, and you'll also want to bring, obviously, the assignment. If you have a prompt, a rubric, all that stuff, kind of have that on hand to give them a sense of the context there. I think that is all I've got. Any questions about the Writing Center or questions about anything else in the presentation?
Then I would add that, though they don't do editing services, your mom does. So you can send it to her. Mine did. Yeah.
About how much of our design document would you expect?
We're not expecting anything. That's why it's a draft that's based on completion.
What was the average?
Well, what do you mean with the
Like
Average.
So I mean, if I were doing it, I would say, well, what have we covered so far, right? I should have read the overview, so I should have like an introduction and an overview and a purpose, right? That first phase of your basic classes that you're designing, right? Outline that, not full text or anything like that, because eventually you'll want to design what's called a UML diagram, universal modeling language, where I believe on either next week's lab or the week after that, we show you how to do that in Eclipse. just by downloading a plugin. It takes all your classes and automatically generates this beautiful looking diagram, right? And there's your section on all of your classes. But talk about them a little bit, right? So that's what I would expect. Very drafty though. The more that you give us, the more that we can give you feedback on. The less that you give us, the less feedback we're going to be able to provide. Other than this needs to be more substantial by the end, all right? The drafts themselves, 5 points each. You turn in a draft. Other than, we might not give points if you just turned in the templates that we gave you, right? At least put your name on it, you turn that in. We give you free evaluation, but you get your 5 points. That's 5% of the paper itself. I think there are 5 drafts, so that's 25% of the paper itself. Each one of those 5 points only translates to about 0.5% of your final grade. But so if you skip a draft, it's not that big of a deal. But you take that 5-point hit, but the worst hit is not getting any feedback on your draft. So we're not expecting too much at all. Just making sure that you've got you filled out the template according to your own information. That you've got maybe that introduction. You're going to have to go back maybe and revise that later anyway, right? Because, I forgot all about that we also have to have a sales report. And so I'm going to have to put that back into the introduction. Yeah.
So, I'm done with my draft, but I'm gonna have to refactor my code. Does this mean I have to rechange my draft today?
Not today, no. Certainly by the end, right? But that's excellent because you had an initial design. You drafted your code, you found a design flaw, you went back and you changed your design.
So I
right?
should state that in the future versions.
You take that section that you had, and then that was my alternate design that didn't work out. Why didn't it work out? Here's my notes on why it didn't work out. Right, that's perfect. Let's see. I'm going to check online for any questions. Nope.
Or if you just yeeted your old design out of existence,
Yeah.
you could probably just give an overview of what that looks like. I
Right.
imagine.
And again, no technical details in that you shouldn't be telling me what object-oriented programming is. You shouldn't be telling me what inheritance is. We'll eventually get to that. Hopefully you're using a library to generate the XML and the JSON. And so a lot of people ask what belongs in the bibliography. That belongs in the bibliography. And then you just cite that we used the following library to generate this stuff. We've got stuff in there as placeholders. We've got that nice little picture of a quadcopter that has nothing to do with your project. That should not be in there after even in your draft, right? We've got some citations in there just to show you how to do citations. Not necessarily that you need to use those citations. In fact, you shouldn't use those citations. I think that they're just random citations. Yeah.
For the future, there are two options that we can choose, either a Word template or a LaTeX template.
Yep.
Would it be worth learning how to work with LaTeX?
That's a good question. Is it worth learning LaTeX? It's up to you. If you're going into academia in computer science or mathematics or even physics to a point, absolutely. My personal opinion is it's worth learning LaTeX just for the bibliography alone, because then you can download BibTeX entries and put them in, hit a couple buttons, and you've got MLA style. Change one line, and now you've got APA style. Right? There are. Word has a little bit better support nowadays for bibliographies, but still, it's not there. The typesetting of figures and stuff like that, in my personal opinion, I fight Word more than I am actually writing if I'm writing in Word. Versus LaTeX, you hit one button and it does everything beautifully for you. Certainly if you're going to be doing a substantial amount of mathematics, oh yeah, definitely use LaTeX. Because Word mathematics or non-LaTeX typeset mathematics look terrible, and everybody knows that's not LaTeX. But it's not something to learn if you're pressed for a deadline, but it doesn't sound like you are. It sounds like you've already got the draft good in a good spot. Then you can take some time and learn LaTeX. I will say that it's not a skill that translates into industry. If you're going into industry, nobody's going to even know what the hell LaTeX is. I don't know. Technical writer, LaTeX. Ever heard of it? Nope. Exactly. It's used almost strictly in academia, almost strictly for mathematics, science, STEM stuff. Right. Now that said, my books are all LaTeX, and why? Because I have a glossary, I have an index, I have bibliography. I have all these things, and it generates them all automatically for me, and that is usually a service that once a writer produces all their stuff, they hand it off to an editor that then they're doing all that stuff. And so it's like a second whole person. I don't have a second whole person, but I do have this magic thing called LaTeX that does it all automatically for me. All right, then I will see you next week. Again, thank you for Charlotte, and thank you to the UNO Writing Center, and we'll see you next week. Good luck on your drafts.